Well, hello, hello. I'm on this early today. As you can see, there's a lot of light out still. It's been raining quite a bit, and it was really dark, and now it's lightened up, but it's going to rain again later. So, anyway, I thought I would do this now, and I'm one of those um, peculiar people that loves the rain. So, I mean, not endless rain, but enough rain in the seasons when it would come. So anyway, that doesn't bother me. But anyway, it's nice and bright, so I thought I'll do the videos now. And again, thank you for all those lovely comments. Thank you. I really appreciate this. It really feels like, there's somebody else at the other end. Because I said, I get a lot of views. That's some videos get quite a bit, but there's hardly anybody, nobody leaves a comment, or a like once in a while. I mean, other than my one favorite subscriber, pretty much nobody. So I'm glad for this. Um, anyway, so about all that, I thought I would also, share some things about these issues before I get into the topic. I have two videos for today. They shouldn't be too long. But yeah, you know, um, the problem in the typical institutional church today is it's not really biblical, and in many ways, not just in one way that I talk about often, but in many ways, you know, like the real Jesus of the Bible, what, what would he do, right? Do they really present him? We have to ask ourselves this when we go to these places. And um, they do lip service sometimes, but they don't carry it through in their actions. If they did, the church would look so different. And, that's one of the key signs that they're not doing it, the right way. Um, they're not really presenting him correctly. So, it's one reason I'm doing this channel. I mean, I just go through the Bible and I read what it says and interpret it the obvious way. It's just usually clear enough. We can see, interpret the meaning. If you have the Holy Spirit, then of course you have that insight. But um, that's it. There's so many people that they want to turn Jesus into somebody else. Sometimes they want to make him into a political character or just, a revolutionary character. Like it's all cultural, and some people want to just turn him into something that's more of a hippie, somebody who would want to change some things, right? Help the poor, that kind of thing, but who just turns a blind eye to sin. They want to turn him into that fellow. Um, they're they're all kinds. Then you get ones that think he was just a good teacher, and that's it. Just give you some advice, and everybody goes on their merry way. But there's no saving power in that, you know. So there's so many that turn him into something else. I did a video once with that title, Do You Have the Right Jesus? And I had a little picture of all kinds of different versions of Jesus, and then the cults, they have their own Jesus. It's a different Jesus. The New Age has a different Jesus. Other religions even have a different Jesus. They will refer to him, but it's not the Jesus of the Bible in any of these cases. So, we have to make sure we have the actual Jesus, the right Jesus, and the Jesus of the Bible. He even said, unless you believe in me, him, as the scripture has said, then you'll die in your sins. So it's not just believe in him, but it's believe in him as the scripture has said. So we have to consider all his titles. He's God in the flesh. He's the Savior of the world. He calls us to repentance. He's the high priest, the king, the prince, the good shepherd. All these titles. I did a video on titles too, but anyway, all these things, the Messiah, so on, and all of this, and that's what we need to believe. He's fully God and fully man, and he's the only one who can save us. There's no other way, there's no other person, there's no other path. That's it. So we have to believe all this about him for it to apply to us. So it's so important. But anyway, so they, even if they have that right, but they don't live it out, they don't carry it out, they don't present that outwardly in their lives. And now, I'll just divert a little bit before I come back to that. When it comes to things, oh yeah, I was asked that question if I've ever been to England, and I haven't been to England itself, but I have been to Germany a few times, and I've been to Austria. I would love to travel to every country over there. I mean, every country in Europe, I would love to do that. And what I like about it is each one is different. It has its own unique flavor and personality, and each one is lovely in its own way. So I would totally do that. I couldn't afford. So I have traveled a lot, and I have been to Europe, but I haven't been everywhere. And if I would ever be able to do that, I would want to combine it into one trip, because that's more economical. Just fly once, kind of do a train and backpacking trip everywhere, and then fly back. Maybe after this could take, I don't know, a year. So anyway, I don't know if I would ever be able to do that, but if I would stop and visit you, that's for sure. So anyway, but yeah, so that's where that stands as far as travel goes. But the economy, now I know things about England too. I have come across many things in my life, and there's a certain culture in England. I know it's very, they're really about elitism and all that, and just levels that way, and anyway, that's one thing I appreciate here is that isn't the case here. That at least isn't, at least it wasn't, but it's started to get that way. And about the economy now, I mean, the economy is, it was a time, was fine, but I mean, it's been getting worse and worse, and they won't talk about it, but you see it, you see people losing their jobs, you see homeless people, you see benefits being cut left and right, all kinds of workers being laid off. I mean, there's a situation right now again, um, several actually, several situations, and everybody in need is just portrayed as someone who is lazy and should get up and get a job and pick themselves up and do something, as if that were possible. And there are always going to be people who take advantage, but there are also always those who do need help legitimately. And you have people disabilities and elderly, or somehow maybe they just don't get a lot of social security. Maybe they were a housewife and he left, and they worked part of their time and they worked their whole life, but maybe not in a job outside the home. So uh, maybe they don't get a lot of social security. So they rely on these benefits to live, and maybe they're elderly now and they can't do anything, or they have a disability and they can't. So, I mean, are they telling all these people, just pick yourself up and go get a job? And it's not possible. And nobody considers this, or the fact that maybe there are no jobs because jobs have been disappearing. Things are being replaced. A lot of jobs are being replaced by AI. So that's another epidemic that's been going on. And how do they expect these people to live? Just pull food out of the woodwork? So there are a lot of problems now. But another thing is the housing prices. And it all goes together, it goes houses and apartments, anything, for rent or for sale. I mean, space rent for mobile homes, it all is kind of linked together in the market. So prices will all go up or down accordingly. So now, I mean, the rents just for apartments are so expensive. And it's crazy that they ask for somebody's income to be 3 times the rent of the place they're trying to rent. The irony of this is that the rent that people are asking is 3 times as high as the typical full-time salary you will get at a average job, a basic job even. The irony too is, well, they and then they want to shame people, like, well, you should have gone to college. Oh, okay, so everybody is supposed to get a college degree, and then there's nobody to do the other type of labor. you know there are people like me who did get a college degree, and we don't have a house either, and it wasn't our fault. So there are all kinds of situations, economy crashes, different things that happen. Nobody takes any of that into account. So nobody has mercy anymore. It's ruthless now. That's what I see out there. The attitude is brutal and heartless. So everywhere in general. But you know, anyway, I mean, even the most basic job level, if let's take the full-time salary, and that's hard to find too, because they don't, want to pay insurance. And then they claim, well, their business can't afford the insurance because then they won't be in business. And this is what I was talking about earlier, that ultimately it's not really sustainable. There's always it's just like passing a debt around and nobody can pay it. But anyway, I mean, the workers can't pay this high fee, and then they want such a high insurance rate, because they want to get rich, and it's endless. Well, here it's really bad with that, but it's better over there in those ways many times. But, so if you even find a full-time job is another thing. And even if you find something close to that, but let's say it's full-time, you should be able to live independently, support yourself if the economy is set up right. I mean, even if it's a small place, you should be able to afford that and food and whatever else you need. Otherwise, why do we work? They just think, oh, it's okay for you to work all your life and not have anything. Like you're just a slave, you know. I also hear statistics that some of these companies that um, the main owners, it used to be the horrendous difference of their salary versus the average worker's salary in that company. It used to be, I heard this maybe 20 years ago, it was so bad, it was they would get 40 times more. Now I've heard a statistic, I think it was 320 something times more than the average worker in their salary. Now, this is not necessary, and it's just if they claim, well, it's not worth it for us unless we get a certain amount. Well, is it worth it for all these workers unless they get a certain amount? No. And many people have come to this conclusion it's not worth it to work because you're working for nothing. You're just working to be a slave. You're not, getting anything for it, really. I mean, I know cases they work at these basic jobs pretty much full time, and they live in their cars because they can't afford the rent, and they just use their money for food and that kind of thing. And is that okay? No, it's not. And there's so many things like this that are so bad. It is getting worse. I don't know, what the future will hold for anyone, and it's so bad now. But anyway, so that is the reality, and I totally understand. Like you mentioned that job, and that's a nice job. I mean, I love flowers. I guess you figured that out, but you know, that sounds like a good, decent income type of job too, and that's the situation. I know, and they don't pay teachers a whole lot either. It's just, it's bad, but there are many examples of this kind of thing. And just remember, it's no reflection. Anybody out there listening, okay, it's no reflection on us. It's a reflection on the failure of the system for us. It has failed us. We have not failed it. Okay, so never take this in a way to define you, yourself, your identity, okay? We're doing all we can, and we should be, I don't want to say proud, but feel good about, accomplished about that, what we've done in our lives. If they want to acknowledge that or not is their problem. But I do feel for people who, now it's getting so bad. But anyway, okay, I could talk about this all day too, but now I was going to mention something about back to the church situation. Yes, another thing I was going to say yesterday, and it ties in today as well, is the thing, they they have turned church into a business. Basically, that's all they really care about is the money. That's why they twist these Bible verses, okay, to make people feel like they twist their arm to drop the money in the plate. Okay, that's what's happening. And there is nowhere in the New Testament for the church that instructs us to give anything that way. Okay, there's nothing. Okay, the one, it says something about giving. It's more food, that kind of thing, but it's for those who make their living by the gospel. That doesn't mean pastors. It means missionaries. People who travel spreading the gospel like the apostles did. They would live like when they would stop by the churches and they would be sustained by the church. They would be fed and housed, and then they would move on to the next church, and that's reasonable, of course, and they're contributing to the spreading of the gospel. That's great, that's totally different, okay? If they're supporting missionaries, great, but it's not for people who are there all the time. So that's the part they'll twist that. And then any mention of giving was always for the poor in the church. All right. And then they'll try to pull from the Old Testament verses that don't apply to us, and they'll twist those in a way they wouldn't even have applied to the people in the Old Testament either. So they do this. They are pros at this, okay? So we have to be very wise and know the scriptures so we are not exploited. That's why I'm doing this. So the sheep are not exploited. Okay, that's so important. I know there's so many people that get abused and then they leave the church and then they leave the faith. Okay, if they leave these corrupt systems, wonderful, but don't leave the faith. Don't blame Jesus for something they did, not him. And he's even calling it out. See? So just form a home church. That's all the advice I could say is get together as the true church, and nobody needs any money. You just sit around and do everything you're supposed to do. Have a potluck. I mean, that's it. You don't need money for that. Nobody there needs the money. So anyway, unless somebody really is in trouble, I'm like I said, helping the poor in the church is what that was for. Okay, now another problem, and I'm not going to make this all about the fallacies of how they twist tithing. I did that enough times, but see other videos if you are new. But the problem to how they twist tithing is their ideology about it is heretical in a way that it leads to another heresy. It leads to the prosperity gospel, and I'll explain that. Let's say the typical church, right? And there are whatever number of members going, and let's say generally they're tithing or giving or whatever. And then you walk in the door. Let's say me or anyone would walk in the door and we really have nothing to spare. Okay, we're just making ends meet. We're happy to make our rent and our food and our bills and have a little left over for a holiday candle. Right? That kind of thing. So, and we're not going on trips, we're staying put and we're just sitting here and smiling like Quaker Will, right? So that's it. But then we come, let's say we walk into such a church, and then right away there's this pressure, right? They might not come right out and say it, but you see all the hints, right? That they expect you. And I've had some of them say, not to me directly, but make statements from the pulpit that they're expecting people to give if you're coming here, like it's just, they're making it a legal obligation. And they're twisting the Bible to do that. See, they don't even understand the scriptures themselves. And then they're up there asking for money for them to deliver the wrong message to us. See, well, anyway, I've heard that too. But even if you don't hear a direct comment, but there's enough pressure, there are enough hints that they expect this, and let's say sometime it comes up. Maybe you are having a private conversation with that, you could say a pastor, whatever kind of church leader title he would have, okay? And you would bring this up. Let's say really you don't know about all this, and you just say, well, I would I would be willing to give. I just can't right now due to my financial situation. There's some, yes, that would understand and have sympathy and just say, okay, thank you for letting me know and don't worry about it. Or they might even be willing to help you. I'm not saying those don't exist, okay? But the general reply is they will jump into the prosperity gospel and try to sell you the idea that, oh, well, you're supposed to give God the first of everything, and then everything that's left over is for you. And well, if you think that won't meet your needs, you just have to have faith, because if you trust Him and you give this part here to us, then He'll bless you and He'll more than meet your need. You'll have more than you gave and more left over. And see this verse right over here, that's what it says. So yes, so just go ahead and drop the money in the bucket or write your check and don't worry about it, and this is essentially the prosperity gospel. If you give to them, you'll get more in return. You'll get a blessing, is what they're saying. That's the prosperity gospel. It's heretical. It does not work. There are millions of people who have been abused, exploited, and ruined by that heresy, okay? They were shipwrecked. They lost so much, and it was foolish, but that's what happened, That's why you have to warn about these things. But then they will use this, and it's heretical, it's arm twisting. And then one might wonder, but then what about that place that says this and that in the Bible? Well, I'll explain that, okay? That was for the poor. Okay, there is a principle, and I've talked about this before, and that's how it works. When you help the poor, then you get a reward, you get a blessing. It's not for the church leaders, okay? It's for the poor in the church. That's how the principle works. That's how that's applied when it comes to you getting back any kind of reward, financially or otherwise, that you, whatever amount, then you get more than you gave. Whatever, it's for that. It's for helping those in need. It could be money. It could be you win something and you get it. Let's just say you win a car. I mean, it could be anything, but it's a blessing in that form. So that does work, okay? It's totally different than giving it to the leaders, okay? Because they're not going to help anyone. It's for them. We all know this. But that way, doing it the way I said, helping those in need, that does work. I can verify that. It's happened in my own life, okay? So that does work. That's what God is talking about with this principle. That's what it is. Then when people in church will come back later and say, yes, but I gave and I didn't get reimbursed and I couldn't make my rent or whatever. I didn't get this and that blessing that you claimed would come. Then they might come back with this and say, oh, well, you'll get a blessing. It might just not be financial. You'll get a spiritual blessing, or you'll get some other blessing, It's like, okay, but they needed the money to pay their rent, right? And they mislead, because that wasn't what they were saying earlier. They were being deceptive, and they have all their sneaky little ways out of it, So that's why I warn about this stuff. It didn't happen to me, but I saw it happening, and I couldn't give anything anyway, but I wouldn't have anyway, because I saw this. I saw through all this, and I thought, well, if they're for real, they'll want to do this for free. If they were for real, they would. See, that's the thing. Like, I know because I know me, I'm sitting here doing this for free. I have done this gone through the whole Bible and then some for free. I don't want any money. I don't want a donate button, I don't want a PayPal link. I don't want any kind of thing like that to take any money from listeners. I refuse it. Okay, that's it. If I got monetized through YouTube, lovely. That's a different thing because it's not coming from you. It's coming from the system. And it's through more people listening that could happen. I don't anticipate it ever will, but that's okay. I was willing to do this for free, so that's the point. If anybody would want to do something, I would just say help somebody poor near you. That's it. But that's how we can thank him and honor him by doing those things. That's what he said. So, I'm just saying the same thing, but that's the right approach there. So, yeah. And I'm fine. I'm not rich. I'm okay, so I'm not complaining either. But anyway, but so if I were, let's say, a man and I would take on a job like that, let's just say, right? Okay. And I would have an outside job and I would do that as much as I'm doing it now totally for free, because it's a passion, because I care. My heart is the same either way, but I'm doing it this way. I'm a woman, I'm doing this, so fine, but that's your heart. If you're really sincere, okay, you're not going to say, oh, no, I need your money. You're just not. I know that. I know how it is if you're sincere and you're passionate for the things of the Lord. This is your heart. So, yeah. Okay, but that's it. So I know the difference. I know what's up, right? So anyway, yeah, so I talked about this. That's what they do. Okay, so it's so hard, to find anything sincere now. But all right, now another thing about that they will twist is they'll twist that verse, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25. Oh, like, oh, you must go to church, or else you are forsaking the assembly of the brethren, all that. And, the verse is in there, but it doesn't apply to those places. It applies to the true meeting of the true church. If there is one in the area, I'd be there all the time. If there was one, if there is one, great, go. But if there isn't, you can't. I mean, I'm not going to go down the road to one of these places that's off in so many ways just so somebody else will be happy that I'm fulfilling this. It doesn't apply to that. And it applies to the true meaning. The meeting of the true church, and so many are manipulated by that as well. See, these are trained professionals. They have learned how to twist your arm every way to get their end result. That's their goal. Okay, they want you there, they want you giving, they want you sitting there. Just sit there and be quiet and then get out. That's all they want, and that leads me right to my next point, which was actually the main point of the video, which I'm finally getting to. And this is the part that's about practical applications of Christian living. When you compare the two church models that I talk about all the time, the biblical model versus their model, okay, you see a huge difference. Okay, if you take their model, okay, what does it look like? aside from the other items I talked about. You walk in a building, you sit down, there's a elevated platform, one person speaks from there pretty much the whole time, and everybody else is sitting there and they're silent and they're motionless for the most part. Some places just have that stand and sit thing, which I don't know why they do this, but anyway, um, you know, they just, otherwise, they don't do anything. They're just sitting there passively. They're not participating really. They're not contributing anything. And as a result, they're not growing. They're really not, you know. If you take me, for instance, anyone who's been a Christian for quite some time and knows the Bible, you've read it all at least once, and you go to one of these places called a church today, you're not going to get anything out of it spiritually. You're just not. And some people might balk at that comment, but it's true. I mean, I'm going to share how that works. But if you're new to the faith and you found a good biblical church, then sure, there is some growth. You'll hear things you don't already know. Hopefully they're right, and you'll learn something and you'll grow. Okay, that's different. Okay, that's possible. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who have been Christians for years and know the Bible. They, have read through it. They understand it. Like me, when I go to these places, and I go for other reasons. Sometimes I'll tell you about that. But okay, like I go and, I come in, they shake my hand, right? They smile. You go, take your paperwork, you sit down, and they will have, a time of worship. That was one of the only things I really went there for. But lately, these are getting shorter and kind of perfunctory, if you know what I mean. I mean, there's no real flowing of the Spirit. There's just, it's very performancy, and that's it. 2, 3 songs, boom, we're done, I don't know. It's just, okay, but that was the only thing. And then they start with the sermon announcements, okay, and then the sermon that goes on for most of this, and I don't hear anything that I don't already know. In fact, I'm thinking of all kinds of great points he could make that he isn't making that I would have made if I were talking, And sometimes you catch things, that's if you're lucky. Many times you catch things that are wrong, Okay, so now I know that's good, but what about the fellow who doesn't know? And he takes that as gospel truth. So, anyway, but with or without that, like, I'm not hearing anything I don't already know. I'm not getting anything out of it. Okay, spiritually, no, I'm not. Nothing, I've been week after week, years, and nothing. No, nothing. Okay, I mean, that's it. And then they want your money for it. Yeah, then there's that, which I didn't do, but okay. Then I thought, well, I'll just go maybe for fellowship. I'll find fellow Christians and have some fellowship, have some Christian friends. Guess what? Nope. Mm-mm. What do? They rush in, they rush out. It's over, boom, they're gone. Some of them have places set up where people can kind of linger and socialize. Maybe they'll have some refreshments, and I'll go to these just for that purpose, and I'm usually the only one there. how am I going to make any friends, Christian friends in a church, if that's the situation? And it's been so typical. That's been the way it's been for years. So, oh, nope, cross that off the list too. Wasn't getting that out of it either, you know? So, like, honestly, then why go? You know, it's true. I mean, and that the only reason then they come with all these things, you know, they come with their legalistic list. Well, but thou shalt do this and thou must do that, or else thou is not doing such and such, and that's where they come with the law, right? Only it's wrong. It doesn't apply that way. But this is the final attempt at arm twisting you. If you see all this and and you're mature, okay, you see that you're not growing from this, but they try to obligate you anyway. See, but if you're really mature, you see through that too. But anyway, that's the deal. Now, again, it's not just, most people are not really growing in that. Even if they are learning, if they're new and they're learning something, but they're not growing very much. And I will explain that. Okay. That brings me to they're just sitting there being stagnant. Okay. They're being passive. They're being spoon fed. And they're being trained to do that. That is what they're used to the point that they can't function if they had to. It's doing more harm than good that way. But the biblical church model, okay, that's in the Bible, I'll go over that again now. That's where this is the good one, obviously, and this is where growth happens. Okay. And not just do you learn, but you grow in more ways than just knowledge. You're actually applying this. Okay, so let me jump into these verses and that will explain it. Okay, so I'll come back to this. This is one of the places, but I want to go here first. Put my pen here so I don't lose that spot. Okay, that's the famous one. And there are more. I should next time get a list of more, but this one really hits the hammer on the nail again. 1 Corinthians 14, verse 26. How is it then, brethren, whenever you come together, each of you has a psalm, has a teaching, has a tongue, has a revelation, has an interpretation. Let all things be done for edification. Okay, there's so much in this. And, it's easy to just read the Bible and pass it all by quickly, but we have to dissect this. We have to digest every word. What does this mean? Again, this order in church meetings, this was the church meeting. Okay, and I know I've hammered around about this a lot. Whenever you meet, every time, this is what the meeting is supposed to look like. Okay, each of you has and you fill in the blank. So everyone participates at every meeting. That's what a church meeting looks like. Each of you, not one, not some, everyone of you has and fill in the blank, okay? It's a contribution. And, he's mentioning spiritual gifts. And yes, they are still for today. But even if somebody doesn't know their gift, I will share how this can still work, okay? Now, it says, let all things be done for edification. It's the edifying of the body. This is how the body grows. It's not just the information that's being shared. It's the fact that you are sharing something. You are participating in this. You are an active participant. You're not a passive pew warmer, okay? That is key. And again, it can just be something that God has shown you lately, some way you've grown lately, something you discovered about Jesus you didn't know before. It can be a dream you had, that you think he gave you. Anything, okay? Even if you don't know your gift yet, you can still do this. You can write a poem or a song and share it. See, this would be hard for many people because that's exactly my point. They're not used to it. If this is we're supposed to be engaging in this way, and if we're doing these things, then it's not difficult. It's not a hard thing to do. It's the norm for us. It's like, think of a team in sports. They're actively playing together. And another thing is here, they're cooperating, they're interacting. It's all one to another, to one another. The one another comes up all the time with this setting. It's learning to be a body, learning to grow as a family, learning how to help one another in different ways, spiritually and even practically if they have a need. They're going through a hardship of any kind, you help them with the need. Everybody helps them. That's a family, okay? They love one another, they know one another, they pray for one another. So they're learning how to be active members of the body. They're also learning what kingdom living looks like. Okay, so that's what I mean. You are participating and you're growing in that, and you're learning how to do that, how to be that. It's not just head knowledge, it's you're doing it, you're applying it in everyday life. And that's part of what a disciple is. You don't just know it, you do it, you live it out, you apply it, you practice it. A good example is, carry your cross daily, right? You're loyal in every situation. You don't deny your faith under pressure. That's a great example right there. You share your faith if somebody asks you, you help someone in some way, This is all living out our discipleship, our faith. And a disciple actually means a learner, but we're learning how to live it out actively. It's not just head knowledge. I mean, can you imagine a sports team and they sit in a lecture style hall, and some coach comes behind a podium and explains everything about the game to them, how you're going to win and what you're going to do and the rules of the game and all this. And they sit there. That's all they ever do. And then they're put out there to one day play in the big game. And they fall flat on their faces because they've never practiced. They've never physically acted this out. They've never carried it out, practical applications in their practice, like in us, in our life with us. So, it was never practice. It was all theory, which is true, but you have to apply it. And if they never practice this physically in their, times as a team together and cooperate in that, like we live this out in our lives actively, if they never do that, and then comes time, that's it. Then comes time for the big game, and they will fail. And the same here, there are pivotal moments in our lives where, it's a big deal and you have to be ready for this. So if you're not doing this all the time, then as a church, not as an individual, I'm not, there's application to that, of course, but That's kind of the point too, yes, but they can fail. Let's just say that, okay? As an individual, it depends on how strong you are. Like, I don't have this situation. Okay, I wish I did. So it's not like, oh, I'm gonna fail. And individually, you can still succeed anyway because you have Jesus. Okay, so it's not like, okay, you're gonna fail. No, but I'm living this out in my everyday life. Okay, myself, but as a group or as an individual, church wise, most are not, and they are setting themselves up for failure because, yeah, there are moments that are coming, opportunities that are coming where you can really stand or fall on something. I'm thinking of things in the end times. A lot of people are going to cave at a certain time. So if they haven't been preparing, then they'll fail. Anyway, so the more of this, the better, obviously. But this is a practical way the church can help you grow if it's done right, and it makes all the difference. And I've heard of this where there are cases where this is happening today, and they're noticing how much they're growing and each other as well as themselves. So that is why God set this up as the model and not the other thing, not the lecture hall model. Okay, so it's so important. And this is another way of practical application to in our life of the Christian faith. It's just actually do what it says. Wow, what a concept, right? Now, last spots I will read are these. Okay, this is Colossians chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. For I want you to know what a great conflict I have for you and those in Laodicea, and for as many as have not seen my face in the flesh, that their hearts may be encouraged, being knit together in love, and attaining to all the riches of the full assurance of understanding, to the knowledge of the mystery of God, both of the Father and of Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Okay, so here, this part being knit, the hearts being knit together in love, that is a crucial part of the church functioning, the church growth together. Instead of that, everybody is isolated, like they're in their little private bubbles, So, again, that's the difference, see? Now, in chapter 3, verses 12 to 17, we have this. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. So here again, one another to one another, And whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Okay, so again, we see another picture of this here. And another thing I will mention about one of the comments is I know, we do this, and sometimes people will return and bite us instead, or we're too trusting, or, that kind of thing. We open our hearts, and it's somebody else will hurt us in some way. Maybe they betray us. Maybe they gossip about us. They somehow will lash out in some way, And I know I've seen it all my life. I've been the same all my life, like that way, and you get all kinds of reactions. So, I can just say, don't change. Just, we have to be the way He called us to be, and for the suffering, there will be rewards. And it does say, love your enemy and do good to those who persecute you, and so on, or do you evil and all that. And some people look at that and think, oh, you're just going to roll over backwards and let them walk all over you. And there is a difference, with this kind of thing too. Like, for instance, I'm not saying if crooks come to the door and ask for money, I'm just gonna, if I had it, would keep handing it out. No, that's not what it means. Or if somebody's abusive, you don't just keep, handing over yourself to be abused. No, of course not. And I have learned as well, like, there are people that it's okay to help, and there are people it's not okay, because they don't help themselves literally, like they could, but they don't, and they just want everybody else to help them, and tomorrow they'll be back for more, that kind of thing. But if you needed help and they were in another situation to help, they wouldn't. So there are types we're not supposed to help, okay? And there are cases like that in the Bible too. So we have to just keep it in balance that way. If we've learned from these things before and we've been wounded by them, just know that God will give you a reward for doing something good. But don't open yourself up for abuse either, Okay, so anyway, there's so much that can be said about these things, but anyway, so just for the church, this is what it should look like. And that's how we grow in our faith, as a body in this way, cooperating, like how the church really grows. And they pay so much attention to growth in numbers. They pay no attention to growth in the way of character and discipleship. Is the church actually growing together as a body? Is the growth vertical spiritually, or is it horizontal in numbers? See, they don't care about anything other than the numbers, because they're getting numbers out of that in their wallets, okay? See, that's it. So this is the goal, and that's what we need to focus on. If we find a small group, if we're blessed enough for that, this is, what to focus on, okay? So anyway, that's it. I just wanted to highlight those things for this video, and then I'll be back for one more